Five Nights at Freddy's as a series is 10 years old, and the story is still ongoing. This franchise started as a cryptic game every couple of months that would give us hints into a deeper story going on, but over half the length of this series has been bigger, multi-year developed, story-based video games. But for a lot of people, the story itself, as of right now, is in a bit of a flux. The last time we got anything from this series that takes place in the current time of the timeline was a DLC that came out last year for a game that came out 4 years ago. So while it's wonderful that we've been getting games that flesh out the outside areas of the timeline and the earlier parts of the timeline, a lot of fans are sat here wondering, well, what's going on now? What comes next? Hopefully this video can be a sort of lighthouse for those of you lost at sea, as not only will I be telling you exactly where we are in the current story of Five Nights at Freddy's, but where I think we're going to be going next. So slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Also, I think I finally figured out the audio situation. If this is much better, let me know. If it's worse, let me know. I took your feedback from the last video and I'm putting it on this video. The most important question to answer is, where are we now? To figure that out, I think it's important that we can divide FNAF into about 3 distinct arcs. An arc being a series of a story that's centered around one theme. That's not exactly all-encompassing of a definition there, but it's a good enough definition for today's video. The first arc of FNAF I would call the Missing Child era. This covers everything from the beginning of the timeline to FNAF 2, FNAF 1, FNAF 4, and Sister Location. The stretch of time where, whether or not William Afton has died, the main focus of the games in this part of the story are the animatronics that are actively possessed by the missing child incident victims. That is the focus and the forefront, and that's the first arc of the story. After that, we have the Springtrap era, covering the games FNAF 3, FNAF 6, FNAF World, and Ultimate Custom Night. This section of the story focuses on the killer himself, William Afton, and after he dies, how he possesses himself in an animatronic suit to continue doing horrible things. And it follows his exploits and his ultimate demise. Which means, currently, I believe we're in the third arc of the story, the Mimic era, which would cover FNAF AR, Help Wanted, Security Breach, Help Wanted 2, and Ruin. All of these games focusing on the current main threat of the FNAF universe at this time, the Mimic, and its iterations. I'll go more into what the Mimic is in the next section of this video, but before we get there, I just want to make one thing clear. Just because the Mimic era of storytelling starts after FNAF 6 does not mean that the Mimic as a character didn't exist before FNAF 6. Secret of the Mimic is the next game we're going to get, and it seems like it's going to take place in 1979. We've also had hints and evidence to show us that the Mimic has been around this whole time, if at most dormant. So yes, it might be incredibly important throughout this timeline, but I would still argue that its main arc and the time of the games where it is the central focus point begins with Help Wanted. Technically FNAF AR, but you can't really play that anymore, so does it count? Not really. But if we're partway through this Mimic era, what is that story so far? It sucks being in a cave, surrounded by water, but you can't drink any of it because it's cave water. So thirsty. Huh. This might help. Today's video is brought to you by GAMERSUPPS. Huh. Perfect. If you've been following the live streams, you'll know that I've been partnered with GAMERSUPPS for some time now. You can use code RYTOAST to get 10% off your order, and it gives me a little bit of a kickback when you do, which is awesome. But the reason that I partnered with them in the first place is because I really enjoy their drink. It's a powder-based, zero-sugar drink that comes with or without caffeine. I've been drinking so much of this stuff, and I'm not exaggerating. One serving is about 100 milligrams of caffeine, and I'll have 1 or 2 of those around lunch to keep myself up and awake, but I'll have the non-caffeine versions throughout the day just as a beverage. It's fully replaced my soda intake. And if you want to try GAMERSUPPS, there's never been a better time to try. As always, you can get their free samples, but for Black Friday, if you buy a tub of any flavor, you get a shaker cup for free, which is an amazing deal. Not to mention, a bunch of new flavors just dropped right now. One of their new flavors that came out a little over a month ago is Pom Pom Punch by Gloomy Bear. It's one of their creator flavors. One of my favorites so far. I've been drinking it non-stop. So if you want to try out GAMERSUPPS, like I mentioned, there's a great Black Friday deal going on right now, but make sure to use code RYTOAST to get 10% off and give me money, which is a little more important. Thanks again to GAMERSUPPS for partnering with the channel. Well, at least I got something to drink now. Oh, dragon fruit. This is, I think, the story that a lot of newer fans or older fans coming back to check in on things are getting confused. Because in a way, it's very separate from where FNAF started, which only makes sense. Stories change and evolve over time. But because of that, a lot of people don't have any touchstones to grab onto. So I thought it best to just give a full timeline and narration of the Mimic era of the story. But as always, there's going to be a lot of speculation and theories weaved in to make a more satisfying narrative as I go on. So I'm introducing the lore stoplight right here. Essentially, as I go through this story, one of 4 colors is always going to be lit. If I'm saying something that is directly confirmed within the games themselves, the light will be green. You're almost never going to see this because I'm going to be very picky about this. If I'm saying direct information from a book or part of a game that's been scrapped, it'll be blue, which many fans do believe that counts as just straight up confirmed information, which is fair, but I do want to differentiate it. If what I'm saying is speculation that isn't directly stated anywhere, but is a very small piece of speculation that's just like 1 or 2 implications away from being confirmed, it will be yellow. Most of the timeline is going to be yellow, frankly, because most of the information we have is speculation. A perfect example to show what I mean by this is the Save Them minigame from FNAF 2 that I talked about last week. Getting too technical, Mark doesn't want to hang out. I never said it on a video, but thanks again, you guys, for the amazing support this little guy got. I hope you guys enjoy them when they arrive. I don't know when, sometime in like a month or 2. Makeship will probably tell you. Although, tag me on Blue Sky when you receive them. I'd love to repost those. Anyway, purple guy sprite. In FNAF 2 in the Save Them minigame, there's this purple guy sprite who attacks the animatronics and then You Can't shows up. It is never once stated that this is William Afton. William Afton's name isn't even introduced in the game until FNAF's sister location. And at that point, we only get Mr. Afton and we assume the William from the books. But pretty much everybody agrees that this purple guy sprite is William Afton, because we know for a confirmed fact, thanks to FNAF 6, that this purple guy sprite is William Afton because he kills Charlotte Emily. Charlotte Emily's name isn't said in the games either, but we know that that is William Afton. So in the same game, another minigame shows another purple guy doing something similar to William Afton. So this is a very light assumption to make, but technically it's not directly stated that this is William Afton. I've just realized I've been gesturing outside of the green screen. Oops. So if I was doing a video on FNAF 2 and I said, William Afton shows up and Save Them, that would be yellow. And finally, sometimes I'm going to have to make an assumption or an implication that has no direct evidence linking to it. Just something that, like, we have a blank spot here and a point A and a point C, and I'm going to infer the point B with no evidence, just with logic. Or like using an example from somewhere else and applying it here. When I do that, red will show. So the most strenuous parts of this theory are those red sentences, which we'll get to when we get to. Got it? Good. I just want to be super clear that, like, obviously this is all theory and speculation built off of some evidence. I don't want anyone thinking I'm saying this is directly canon, especially since I hope a lot of new fans of the franchise will use this as a touchstone for the current story. Anyways, without any further ado, what is the current story? At some point in time, the Mimic is created. The important part of it is its programming, dubbed the Mimic 1 program, where it tells the animatronic it's inside of to observe all of its surroundings and replicate it. And it's initially put into an endoskeleton. All it's programmed to do is just copy. In the books, this endoskeleton is originally created by Edwin Murray for his son to have a playmate, but after a horrible accident, Edwin beats the hell out of it and abandons it, to which it continues to copy their everyday life and chores, but with a violent twist. The books also tell us that at some point, Fazbear made an entire line of Mimic endoskeletons to attempt to cut down on programming. Instead of having to code something to dance and sing, if it was a Mimic endoskeleton, they could just have a dancer dance in front of it one time and they'll just copy that dance. They could also shift the shape of their body to fit into any costume, but they were eventually discontinued after they copied humans in, quote, unexpected ways. Cut to Help Wanted, and Fazbear Entertainment hires a game development studio to make a VR experience of Fazbear Entertainment. The goal of it was that at this point in time, there's several rumors surrounding the brand. The stated purpose of the game is to make light of the stories and rumors surrounding the brand, but we learned that all of these stories and rumors are true and real events that happened, but Fazbear is trying to frame it as nothing but petty rumors and muddy the waters, basically trying to get away with it by laughing at themselves. During this development, technology is sent over by Fazbear to be scanned into the game to assist with development, and it's in this moment that the Mimic 1 program enters the video game. That program manifests as Glitchtrap. Now, some people argue that Glitchtrap is part Mimic 1 and part William Afton in some way, either his remnant or his agony or something like that, and that's a completely valid belief. I personally don't believe that's true though. I think the Mimic One program that gets scanned into the game did at some point observe William for some time. It seems like the Mimic was incredibly important and we're learning more about it. But I think that's where it's getting its William tendencies, not actually William's soul or agony infecting it. Regardless, in Help Wanted, the Mimic One program learns and observes all of the worst moments of Fazbear's history, as that's kind of the point of the game and that's kind of the point of the Mimic One program. Its new objective is to recreate those atrocities. It's learned all about the MCI and now it's here to make some kids go missing. But to do that, it first has to leave the game. It tries to take over the mind of Jeremy, but he cuts his face off to escape, possibly dying. Then it targets its next victim, an unnamed video game tester. However, she's smart enough to catch on that something's wrong, and notices that this entity attaches itself to the logs that she's been recording while developing the game. So she splits up those logs and hides them throughout the game, effectively neutralizing the program. It's at this point that the game is traded over to another company to finish its development, and Vanessa begins playtesting the game. The first tape she finds seems to be a fake one made by Glitchtrap to egg on someone to find the other tapes. Vanessa does just that and puts them all in one place, and when she does, Glitchtrap materializes and takes over her mind, creating the Vanny persona within her. Her mind isn't fully taken over, but seems to have two distinct modes, and now that Glitchtrap has a servant in the physical world, it and Vanny move on to the next phase of the plan, the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. If the Mimic One program wants to make children go missing, it has to be in the physical world, so it needs a body. It's around this time that through unknown means, Vanny is also able to convert a small boy named Gregory to the side of Glitchtrap, creating the Dr. Rabbit or GGY persona. They both have their own job for Glitchtrap. Vanny begins attempting to create a new body for the Mimic One program to inhabit in the physical world. Meanwhile, GGY is spreading Glitchtrap throughout the Pizzaplex into animatronic systems and arcade games. At some point, they come across the Mimic, this physical endoskeleton in the basement of FNAF 6, which the Mimic One program was initially made for, and they decide to trap it in a spare room for now, possibly for it being too dangerous to work with. Quick pause here. I think it would make much more sense if the Mimic we see in Ruin is the body that Vanny was making for the Mimic One program, and that after Vanessa and Gregory are freed, they go back and trap it just to get rid of it and bury it. But unfortunately, in Ruin, who we are pretty sure is Gregory says this.
I really don't know what it is, but it's been trapped down here a really long time.
Which to me sounds like they didn't build it, they found it there, which doesn't make as much sense. It could go either way, but I think with the evidence we have, it makes more sense that they just found it here and trapped it. For an unknown reason, possibly the arcade machine Balloon World being beaten, Gregory manages to break free from Glitchtrap's control, and around that time, Glamrock Freddy short circuits, his safe reboot flushing the Glitchtrap program from his system as well. The two of them are now free, but confused. They manage to navigate the Pizzaplex and escape, and in the process, they free Vanessa from her Vanny persona by beating the Princess Quest arcade cabinets. The Vanny persona, however, seems to live on digitally, looking for a new host. It's during this time that Cassie's dad begins to look into what's happening at the Pizzaplex. As an employee and using his Fazbear-provided Vanny mask, he begins trying to rout out the Glitchtrap problem, but instead is slowly taken over by it, and once he's no longer useful, he's discarded. It's unclear exactly how, but he seems to be dead now. Sometime later, Cassie, a friend of Gregory, after getting a message from who she thinks is Gregory, sneaks into the abandoned Pizzaplex and begins looking for Gregory by using a Vanny mask and a Faz wrench. By the end of that game, it's found out that she was actually talking to the Mimic this whole time, who manipulated her into freeing it and getting rid of all of the constraints. There are 3 endings to the Ruin DLC, but all 3 of them show Cassie being stuck in the basement with the Mimic, and she's either fully taken over by the Vanny mask or very close to it. And that's where we're at currently. But if that's what's now, the burning question on everyone's mind is, what comes next? Mimics freed. So now where will this new story lead? Damn, a Hamilton reference in 2024. If that does not earn me a subscription from you, I don't know what else will. So you should probably go hit the button and like, because it really helps the video. We know that the immediate next game coming out in the franchise is Secret of the Mimic, and it's set in 1979, which makes sense from a storytelling perspective. We just got the teaser of a game that's showcasing the grand reveal of this new villain, and the next game is going to dig into its backstory so we can know more about it, know what we're up up against and then eventually face off later in the franchise. And from everything that's been surrounding Help Wanted 2 and Ruin and even Help Wanted, it seems like Secret of the Mimic is going to take place at or around Fall Fest, the festival that was annually held either by Fazbear Entertainment or by someone who partnered with them from 1970 to 1983. It could be longer, but we know at least those 2 dates. But again, that's the backstory of this timeline. That'll be telling us more in the past. And if that's our Fall Fest game, the question that becomes, what is the next chronological game in the series going to be? Well, if you look at our players, I don't think it's a huge leap to guess what is coming next. We have Gregory, Vanessa, and Freddy. In some way, he might just be ahead. 3 previous victims of Glitch Trap who have all been freed. And we also have Cassie, the Mimic, and the Vanny persona. See where I'm going with this? I think the most logical option for the next chronological game in the timeline is that Ruin is showing us how Cassie becomes a villain. The Vanny mask finally seeps into Cassie's mind, fully taking her over and making her a Cervic to the Mimic. And now that the Mimic 1 program has a physical body and another human servant, it's time to start making children go missing again. And with that assistant, Cassie is able to lead the children to the Mimic without the Mimic getting in too much danger. It's a real tag team situation. The Mimic and Cassie can go to any Freddy's restaurant, the Mimic can replace the endoskeleton of one of the performers, and then they've got a perfect setup. But it's not just that, because I think there's a perfect opportunity that if I know how Scott Cawthon writes, they're going to capitalize on. Who is Cassie's favorite animatronic? If you've played Ruin, you know far and away it's Roxanne Wolf, or Roxy. And we know that at the end of Ruin, Roxy makes it down to that basement to fight the Mimic and seemingly lose. So there's now a Roxy exoskeleton in that basement. What if the Mimic puts on that exoskeleton to better manipulate Cassie? After all, we know the Mimic can fit into any costume. So in the next game, the villain might be the Mimic posing as Roxanne Wolf and Cassie posing as Roxy's biggest fan, the little girl who knows the secret backstage access that can get you to a one-on-one show with Roxy. And once you do, you get killed. And why do I think this is so likely? Because Cassie would be a mind control victim wearing a bunch of wolf merchandise and someone who seems innocent but is very dangerous. So she would simultaneously be a wolf in sheep's clothing and a sheep in wolf clothing. It's too perfect to pass up. So who could stop them? Well, Gregory, Vanessa, and Freddy's head. I think I've said this for a while now, but I changed course and I'm changing back. I think a almost heist type game makes a lot of sense for this next entry in the franchise. The idea of all 3 of them having a different role in trying to save Cassie and take down the Mimic. Freddy or Freddy's head being the hacker, someone who can get them into the electronic systems of the pizzeria. Vanessa being the face, an adult who can talk to other adults and, buy stuff. And Gregory being the guy on the inside, the kid who's small, who can get into places and is unassuming. The interesting thing about this is, if you consider how long the Mimic's era has been, even though as a character it only showed up on screen like 1.5 games ago, I could see this game being the last game in the Mimic era, making way for a new era to begin. After all, if we count Help Wanted, it's been a long time since the Mimic's been the focus of the story. But we'll save that speculation for when we get literally any information on whatever the next game is going to be. Yeah, because I tricked you into watching a speculation video on a game that hasn't been announced yet, so oops. But what do you think? Am I way off? And what do you think of my summary of the current story and where we are? I know a lot of newer fans get the basic premise of FNAF, but have no idea what's currently going on in the story, so I hope this can help. In the meantime, if you want to hear some more classic stories about FNAF, on my 3rd channel, Right Does, I just did an audiobook reading of Lonely Freddy, and you can listen to that right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.